So I'm not working at the moment. I've taken time off to fix the back pain, but I want to be more active on the YouTube channel. Just jumping into it and saying that I developed a lot of overprotective tendencies throughout the injury, and I just wanted to sort of speak on those. And now that I'm not working, I think I made an active effort while working to sort of justify why I was protecting myself in these ways. Because of work, it was like I can't really afford to flare up over attempting to introduce movement again outside of the gym, because I can't afford to not go into every single shift. But I just wanted to sort of speak on what those looked like for me and how they've changed over the timeline of what I've gone through. When I first started, I guess I was quite literally like an ironing board. I was so stiff because I had seen a physio and he didn't really give me the sort of movements that I was hoping for, or the results. It's probably a better word than I was hoping for. And I went out just not wanting anything to do with the physio world or just any sort of medical professional. I didn't feel like there was a place I could go to where I was going to get the adequate information that wasn't just like, let's open your back and like give you a surgery at 21 or 20. But yeah, so I sort of went on my own journey a little bit, and a lot of that was through like McGill and the back mechanic, if you haven't heard of it, but it's very widely known in the back community. But I definitely think just not knowing what I was getting myself into, that those protective factors long-term have an impact. So for example, like when I first did the injury, you'd go into the physio and they get you to do like their little tests, and one of them was always like, put your feet together and try and touch your toes. Probably for the first, maybe till I went to the second physio, which was 6 months into my recovery. If you had asked me to touch my toes, I probably would get like to my like upper thighs, like maybe 5 to 10 centimeters from being completely straight. Like I was extremely still like flared up, and I had significant like sciatic pain down my left leg all the way down to my ankle into my foot for a long period of time. And it literally meant for that reason. And when I walked in, like if you know about disc injuries, a lot of them do sort of not heal, but basically 3 months is sort of the tissue damage until you're on the road for recovery and out of that acute phase generally. But by the time I'd seen that second physio, all of those protective measures that I put into place had an impact on me, where I was probably even more stiff and even more sciatically flared than when I initially did the injury. And to get an insight into what I was doing at the time, like I would pretty much only sit on stiff chairs, like anything that was like wooden, completely stiff, just so I could keep like a robotically stiff back. I would fall asleep in like a hyperextended like arch in my back like this, just because it would take the maximum amount of load off my low back so that I could just sort of get out of pain. In the car, like I would have like a stiff like book that I would sit on, and I'd have like this massive sort of back support. It would literally just keep me in this at all times, and I stayed in that at all times, and I crunched my abs as hard as I could at all times, and I was extremely protective. So I forgot a bunch of shit, but I just wrote it down now just so you have more of an understanding of the protective natures. One was I would kneel down if I needed anything at that level where I couldn't bend over at all. So I'd avoid hip hinging altogether because that would flare me up. And this was only up until recently, like within the last month or two, that I started psychologically allowing myself to hip hinge. During the depth of it, I would also lie on my stomach for essentially every 3 minutes of my day that I was at home and I wasn't working, just so I could get that like quick relief of lying on my stomach and having the discs aligned, or at least that's what I thought was going on at the time. I have a standing desk still that I go back and forth between sitting and standing, but for a while there I just didn't have a chair in my room at all. I would stand for hours at a time, and some days I would only stand and lie on my stomach until bedtime, no lying down and sitting. I would limit essentially everything that I couldn't control: chores, work, the amount of driving, social events, etc., just because of the amount of pain it would cause, and eventually the stress of going to those would also impact it as well. Also, when I mentioned stiffness, it was right the way up my spine by 6 months in. Like, it wasn't just my low back. I just had this complete stiffness where I would just do something as little as like a cough and I would feel it from like the top of my shoulder blades all the way down to my low back, like through my spine. And I know that sounds absurd. Like, obviously I should have realized that I was making myself this stiff, but when you just have the level of sciatica, the pain of the sciatica, it was just always the priority to try and overcome, to the point I didn't realize I was probably causing myself more trouble. And just as well, typing this out makes me realize how deep this goes and how no wonder it created mental issues. But if you've had chronic pain, you'll likely understand the levels one goes to in order to try and alleviate the pain in basically any possible way. So, yep. And to be honest, a lot of that translates into now where I have obviously significantly less sciatica. That was about a couple years ago. If you never introduce those movements, they always stay. Like, they never come back. And there's always going to be a little bit of your nervous system saying to you that this is not a safe movement because we haven't done it for so long. Sort of bubble wrapping your lifestyle and never trying to implement movement again, or dynamically sitting or resting in places where the average person wouldn't have to even think twice about. It does have an impact over time. And this thought sort of spurred because I've recently ordered a pair of barefoot shoes. My big fluffy Hokas obviously give me a lot of support and make me feel like I'm walking on a cloud. And that's very helpful for feeling comfortable, but it comes at the expense of competency, which is where you lose your foot health, your strength in your feet, because you have these big, thick soles doing all the work, or at least taking that feeling of the ground out of the experience of walking. And I do a lot of walking, and I guess it was a realization of like, this is a almost protective measure. And this is an example. I've got a major in economics. I don't mean to flex that. I'm just saying that this is how my brain thinks, is where I consistently kind of put things into economic terms, and it kind of clicked that was an example of, I guess, manufactured demand. And you don't really need to know much about economics to know that, like, the number one thing they sort of teach is like the demand curve, your supply and demand. And if there's a higher demand, obviously that creates a lower supply. You can drive up the price. But manufacturing demand is, I guess, in this circumstance where you take a injured foot, for example, or a foot with foot pain, and we as a society sort of design a bandage fix, which comes in the form of a highly protective shoe like a Hoka, which is going to temporarily assist in the feeling of your pain disappearing, because you're now protected with this big cloud shoe. But over time, that comfort comes at a sacrifice of competency, which is where you lose even more foot strength. You're even more protected, and that creates even more foot problems. Now you're seeing a podiatrist. Now you've got, special soles, or a brace that you have to wear, or go to a physio. And so often this is where the problems lie in our medical sort of our medical industry, and whether it's intentional or not, that's what is occurring, where there's more and more of a demand for this feeling of a fix. And I see the irony in, obviously, I'm saying that I purchased barefoot shoes. So I'm still purchasing a product, but I did try and make sure to purchase a cheap pair, because often these types of fixes, or like these holistic approaches, get commercialized and marketed and turned into a market, even though they almost advertise that it's like you're escaping from this matrix of some sort by switching to this more holistic product. I don't really have a conclusion to draw from any of this, but more that it's important to be intentional, I guess, when purchasing things, and realizing the sacrifice of competency for comfort. I'm using it in the sense of my health, being that I've protected myself over a number of years, and it even comes down to, if you don't use it, you lose it. And it was the same thing where if you move like a robot, your body will give you the structure of a robot. Mentally and physically, you will change so that you can only move that way, and there will be discomfort to change it the other way. So the best place to start is to obviously not get in that spot, but once you're in that spot, there needs to be that active change to sort of force yourself out of it. And I'm trying to do that with my feet, trying to do that with my body. But yeah, that manufactured demand is something that the more time I spend in this sort of health industry, it presents. When I say intentional, I guess I mean, like, for example, with the barefoot shoes, I want shoes still on my feet to protect myself from, say, like scratches or infection or things like that when I'm walking in places that I don't want to be barefoot in. So there is a function in buying those things, and finding the right price supports that particular area of consumption, I guess. But I'm sharing all this to sympathize with a lot of people that I'm sure have developed so many protective mechanisms when it comes to back pain or chronic pain in general, and the importance of sacrificing our competence for comfort, whether it be consuming something or just in our day-to-day lives, not taking the time to sort of intentionally push back, or even just have the knowledge in the first place that these are occurring. Because when I got to that state when I was an ironing board, I didn't get there because I actively knew that sitting around resting would result in where I ended up in that circumstance. But that just occurred because I don't think I knew at the time what was happening to me, and I didn't know at the time what was making it worse. And I think that's the case when people buy, and there's a function for clouded shoes and really supportive shoes, but I think it's a temporary solution, the same way resisting your pain triggers is a temporary solution, the same way consuming your phone is a temporary solution for that fix of like relaxation or dopamine, when again manufacturing the demand of like using your phone, consuming these applications that might not necessarily breed long-term solutions, but it's a short-term game at the expense of your competency. This is a ramble video, if you can't tell by 15 minutes of me rambling. But yeah, I'm sitting at home and I'm building up a routine, and I just want to share my thoughts. And I think sharing my thoughts and just putting it out there and having like a semi-structured argument is just better than them just bumbling around in my head. So that's what I'm trying to do with this. And if you take anything out of it, or if you have any of your own sort of parallels that you can draw from that, I'm sure you do, then yeah, just hope it helps to know that there's somebody else kind of trying to think a bit more holistically and understand that a lot of the time what we need is sort of already there, already inside us, and there's still like functional products and ways to improve in that area, but you know, keep at it. Keep at it. It's been fun. The journey's been fun as well. But yeah.